This video is intended to provide extra support to any students looking to complete the Graphing Periodic Trends assignment, but that don't have a strong background in using graphing software, and is intended to help you get started. So, regardless of whether your computer has Microsoft Excel on it, all students that have a Google account with Peel, which should be all of you, should have access to Google Sheets by sheer virtue of having a Google account with Peel. And you can access that either by logging into Google Classroom or even just your personal Gmail account. And you're going to click on these 9 dots here, which is the shortcut for Google Apps, and look for this icon, which is the launch icon for Google Sheets. Mine is right here. If you don't see it within your first icons, you can simply scroll down and look through all of the icons available until you find Google Sheets. And if you click on it, it will open up this page here, which is asking you what kind of spreadsheet you want to create. We don't need anything special, so we're just going to open up a blank spreadsheet that looks like this. Now, the first thing that you'll want to do to make sure that you don't lose this data is to rename your spreadsheet, and I'm going to call it something like Periodic Trends Graph, or something to that effect. That's nice and easy to remember. Now, remember that the intention of this project is for you to graph data where you're comparing the atomic number of an element versus one of the periodic trends at a time. So you're going to be making 3 graphs where you compare atomic number versus atomic radius, then atomic number versus ionization energy, and finally atomic number versus electronegativity. So I'm just going to fast forward a little bit to a sample graph that I have here, and this is intended to show you how to set up your data without giving anything away. So in class, you're going to be given access to a data table which includes all of the information on atomic number, atomic radius, ionization energy, and electronegativity, but in the interest of not spoiling anything, I've set up my data just with the generic independent and dependent variable here. So remember that when you set up a graph, the independent variable is the variable that you control. That's the variable that you decide what to look at. And the dependent variable changes based on how you change the independent variable. And when you graph the two, you are establishing or at least visualizing the relationship between the two variables. So once you figure out what the independent variable is out of atomic number, atomic radius, ionization energy, and electronegativity, you would put whatever that variable is here in place where I've wrote independent variable, and then in brackets you can specify what the units are that are used to measure this independent variable, and again, that depends on what variable you want on your x-axis. And then likewise, do the same for the variable that you want on your y-axis for the dependent variable here. And again, I've literally just made up this data as an example to show you how it is formatted. Now, because you are making 3 different graphs, ultimately your data should look something like this. So because your graphs are only intended on comparing 2 variables at once, again, atomic number versus atomic radius, atomic number versus ionization energy, and atomic number versus electronegativity, it's important to set up your data in 3 different locations so that you don't mix anything up. Now from here, we actually need to look at how to create a graph. So you can do that by selecting all of the data that you want to represent in the graph, and you can do this by either clicking on the top left cell within your data table and dragging so that all of the data that you want to appear in the graph is highlighted like this, or you can do a shift click. First click the top left hand cell, press and hold the shift key, and click on the cell that is at the opposite end of the graph, so the bottom right end, and now all your data is selected. And to make a graph is really, really simple. All that we need to do is go to Insert and select Chart, and Google Sheets will do most of the work for you already, and because I have this as my most normal or default option, it gives me the exact type of graph that I need at first. If you do not see that your graph is a scatter plot, or rather if you see that another graph has been made, when you create the graph, it will open up the chart editor that you see here, and if you click setup and go to chart type, you can actually see that you can create a scatter plot, a line graph, a bar graph, or a variation of a line graph that shows the area under the line as well. But what we're interested in is the scatter plot, because we want to see what the atomic number of your element is and how it compares to each of the variables that you are measuring, so that you can answer the analysis questions following this. Now, the way that I've set up my data basically constructs all of the other parts of the graph for me. Your graph is going to be marked based on whether you have a title that actually accurately describes what the two units are that you are comparing. On your x-axis, the variable that you have listed on the x-axis and the units for their measurement is clearly defined, and a scale is clearly visible so that I can find which actual measurement corresponds to each of your data points. And then finally, the same requirement, clear scale that is easy to read with the proper variable listed for the y-axis and the proper units that accompany them. If your graph fulfills all of these, the rest of this is merely personal preference. It's your choice as to how big or how small you actually want to make the graph, but as long as your title, data clarity, and scale for the y-axis and the x-axis and their units being labeled, as long as all of that is there, you're basically good to go. Now remember that you're not just submitting your graphs, you also need to submit your analysis, which chances are is probably going to be done in some sort of Google document. Now, you can create a Google document the same way that we did a Google Sheet. You just open up Google Apps and go to Google Docs, and it will open up, a blank document here, or the document we want is a blank document here. And now all that I want to do is show you how to get your graph from Google Sheets into a Google document and how you can move that graph around. So if you highlight your graph, you should be able to see that mine is highlighted because there are resize bars that are available. So my graph is selected, and you can either go to edit and click copy, or you can use the keyboard shortcut, there we go, I'm highlighted, Control C, and then if we open up our Google Doc, and then if you go to Edit Paste, or the keyboard shortcut Control V, what we can do, you're given the option to either paste a link to the spreadsheet or to paste unlinked. I'm going to post this with a link to the spreadsheet, which you can access right here. So if you actually want to get back to the data to see what the data is in your Google Sheet, I could actually click this and it would open it up immediately. Now, what we need to do here, because normally your graph is not formatted in order to be able to be clicked and dragged and moved around a Google document effectively. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click on the graph like this, and if we go to image options, there is an option or an options menu that is open on the side, and you're going to go to text wrapping, and if you click wrap text, this will allow you to click and drag and move the graph around your page. And the best part about this option here is that you don't actually need to manipulate your text to make sure that it doesn't go behind the graph. The text will automatically just move to the side whenever you try moving your graph around. But at this point, you should know how to create a graph using Google Sheets, know how to copy it and put it into a Google document, and how to format the graph so that you can move it around the page like this and customize where you actually put it in your document. So this concludes this tutorial for using Google Sheets and importing a graph into a Google document. I wish you all the best of success on your assignment, and if you have any questions about using Google Sheets, I will be available all period during which you will have time to clarify anything that you're not sure about.